Habitat for Humanity has arranged this conference in the capacity of the CSO Urban Cluster Lead of the Global Landfill Network of UN Habitat. It was important for us to bring together a whole range of partners. And so we brought partners from the policy making sector. So we have parliamentarians in our presence and members of different land and housing administrations in different countries, as well as CSOs and professionals and experts. And this has enabled us really to explore and to interrogate a whole range of issues in relation to land. Land is essential to alleviating poverty and to ensuring that we deliver on the new international agenda. It is important for us both to provide exposure to policymakers because they're providing a very important avenue through which to conduct enumeration exercises in communities and for communities to build up strong data, which is very important for policymakers.
The legislators in the continent are very paramount in advancing issues of land access, land rights, and inclusiveness in terms of accessing the land. And I believe that the African parliamentarians have a unique role that is mandated to them by the Constitution to be able to effectively legislate on the land issues.
Land rights and secure land rights is an issue of power relations. How do we caution, critique the different existing power relations to be able to ensure that institutions that have mandates to lead and steer land reform processes are able to do that, and also the people are able to hold those institutions to account and ensure that those institutions are able to deliver on their commitments, on their declarations, and on existing legal and policy frameworks.
The focus of our work is to improve the quality of the lawmaking process, to ensure that the outcomes of that lawmaking process are rights that people are able to access, that people are able to defend, that people are able to protect against encroachment both by other people, other households, but also by the state and by big business. Reforming the legal framework around urban land is crucial to the success of cities in the sub-Saharan African region.
And of course, the other important aspect of the conference is interrogating the whole issue of security, tenure and security topologies, and how policies can be more responsive to the range of tenure types. And we are really hoping that these discussions will filter into the policy-making process and become part of the agenda.
Universities play an important role in trying to provide knowledge, to provide information, to allow for increased access to land. As a university, we naturally don't have a direct implementing role or an agency function in that nature. But what we do is to create coalitions, to create partnerships, to liaise with industry, to liaise with CSOs, and to exchange knowledge and experiences, and hopefully also with policymakers, so that as a university we can influence the policy-making process, but accept that our role is also just one of many stakeholders in the policy-making process that would hopefully lead to increased access to land.
Being an academic, if you really want to make an impact in these areas of land governance and management, you really need to engage in the international organizations such as the FID, such as the UN Habitat, the GLTN, to start build the systems that can really make a difference on the ground.
I think academics, and that's maybe where we are not very good at the moment, is to try and translate research results into policy, if you will, or at least into information that politicians can access for policy making. I think researchers, academic researchers, always assume that whatever they write is of interest to everybody and everybody would be very keen to read it. Very often that's not the case. It's turgid, sometimes in style, it's long, so it is an art that we, I think, need to acquire, to condense things into shorter pieces that are aimed at politicians. So they can work with it, they can use that information and make legislation, or at least policy and better legislation.
Land rights has three aspects. One is around power, is around policies, but critically is around the people. There's no change that can happen without ensuring, a coherent voice from the people. So how do we mobilize people to be able to speak and share their stories of what land and secure land rights means to them, and what this translates to them in terms of, all aspects of development?
What I have learned from all of these processes is the absolute importance, of having the people who are affected by land issues engaged in policy making and the implementation of these policy processes. And I think that, in fact, many of the problems that we continue to talk about with regards to the non-implementation of policies that have been drafted or that were adopted has a lot to do with the exclusion of those who are most affected by the issues on the ground.
A major component of land rights is education and information. So part of our task is to inform the public and to make them aware of their rights as citizens of our country. Particular to that is the rights of women. For a long time in Liberia, women have not had equal rights to land. Historically, women have not inherited land. It has been the sons. And part of the new Land Rights Act is strengthening the role of women. It is providing equal access to land. It's providing the opportunity for women as community members to own land, to trade and market land, same as everyone else.
It's very important that women's rights in Africa are taken care of. And from the perspective of Ghana, we practice customary tenure. There is the notion that customary tenure discriminates against women. It used to, but there is a lot of improvement these days. Most chiefs or traditional leaders accept the fact that women are vital parts of our economies. So they are doing all they can to give every help they can so that women can have equal rights to land and also to be able to be productive and support their families.
And I think that's why we are in this conference, sharing what we are doing and trying to improve women land rights in general, because it's an important asset for our group members and then the grassroots women members.
Everyone has a relationship with land, and that land and property, in fact, should be used to the optimum benefit for the greater good. And this is part of the normative framework that we're bringing to this discussion.
We've recognized that in many developing countries, a lot of conventional land administration approaches have not delivered the security of tenure that we've always expected. And that's why looking at the continuum approach, the continuum of land rights, it incorporates all the ranges of tenure, looking at customary land rights, adverse possessions, looking at issues of passive tenure, and so on. And people can work within. So governments and different organizations can start looking at a whole spectrum of land rights, not just focusing on one aspect on individual titling.
The continuum of land rights approach is something that we advocate at the university. It allows us to deal with the realities of what we see in the ground, what we have in our informal settlements, where you have existing structures, existing activities taking place and going on, and you're not able to start with a greenfields development. And so the continuum of land rights approach allows for a stepwise approach to upgrading of settlements a stepwise approach to the increasing rights and increasing security of tenure and increasing infrastructural development of these settlements. So it allows for an incremental approach to upgrading, which we think is the only realistic possibility in the current environment.
There's a lot of discussion in this conference about rural land, and often when people talk about land and Africa, they automatically think about rural land and the rights of farmers, the rights of smallholders, and the displacement of rural people. But Africa is becoming increasingly urbanized, and so we have to take on the challenge of African cities and land rights. And so what might work with land rights in agricultural areas or customary areas is not always going to work in African cities, which are growing and becoming much more dense very quickly. So we really have to think of appropriate forms of land and property rights for people in African cities, not just for rural land. And that requires real comparison with other countries, such as countries in Latin America, which have also rapidly urbanized, and in parts of Asia, so that we can learn from them around what works for poor people and wealthier people in terms of investment and secure tenure.
I think this conference helps us to situate key contemporary issues. One is unbundling the meaning of secure land tenure beyond ownership. And as per Moja Trust, we are very keen to ensure that the debate around secure land tenure is not restricted to liberal ownership questions, but is opened up to questions of democracy, questions of citizenship, questions of housing, and human dignity. And I think that is what the conference has sort of taken us towards. The whole movement towards security of land tenure must bring on board other core questions so that we do not just do pilots after pilots, but that this becomes real practice advocacies that contribute to social transformation that we are all yearning for.
I think all the actors that are here attending this conference today, it is important to ensure that when they go back to their respective countries and constituencies, they must make sure and maintain the partnerships, because we all believe it's in partnership that we can achieve the impact that we intended to achieve.
Let us come together, academias, governments, civil society, communities. Let's sit around the table, dialogue, discuss, engage each other on the issues of land, because land is a very important and a fundamental issue. Everyone needs to have a piece of land to build a house, to run a business, to do agriculture, to do mining. When we go out of the table, we approach the land issues with a common understanding. We know who should need what kind of land. We make an agreement, meaning that we should create a partnership that brings solution to address land challenges. A partnership that is implementable, not just a partnership for talking and discussing, but without implementing solutions out of the discussion. It's important that we come together and talk together amongst each other.
And if we join forces, the academic, the politicians, and the civil society organizations, we can actually achieve security for all within our lifetime.